Welcome to the Leading Together podcast. I'm joined by my co-host, Joe Olwig, and today's guest is Caroline Fleck, a licensed clinical psychologist, corporate consultant, and adjunct clinical instructor at Stanford University. She specializes in translating insights from psychology and behavioral science into practical skills that strengthen relationships, leaderships, and organizational culture. And she's the author of Validation, a book that brings one of psychology's most powerful and often overlooked interpersonal skills out of the therapy context and into everyday leadership and teamwork. So great to have you here, Caroline. We're big fans of your book, and we're looking forward to having you on. Maybe we'll just start by asking you, what's bringing you joy these days? Maybe it's a new book, a new habit, friendship, perhaps.
Yeah, it's an old habit, actually. So I've gotten back into meditation, which is something I champion, and I've had periods where I was really into it and really consistent, and then years, when like my daughter was young and it was more in the back burner. But I've recently started sitting again, and it is like an old new friend.
Yeah.
And it brings me a lot of joy.
That's encouraging. I've meditation is a spiritual discipline that I have yearned to adopt for many years. And haven't I've honed like prayer, but not meditation. And but I've always, I'm going to get to meditation and I just don't quite get there. I'm curious, what's your like time and habit, maybe practically speaking, just to maybe boost me over the edge here?
That might be like, so I would love to do 45 minutes a day. I maybe do that like every other day. But I think there's a couple of different ways to get into it. Like one is the more like spiritual Buddhist approach. And then the other is like where psychologists come in and kind of stripped it of all of its like religious connotations. And there's some really good protocols there. So if I would recommend this approach called mindfulness-based stress reduction, actually, by Jon Kabat-Zinn. And if you want to learn how to meditate, you'll learn. It's an 8-week course. You can take it online. I highly recommend it.
That's great. Well, glad you reconnected with that old habit.
Yeah.
Well, to start us off and help our listeners understand so much of the basis for the work you're focused on now, could you define what validation is and what drew you to spend years studying it and ultimately writing a book about it?
Yeah. So I'll give you the complex definition, which is, validation shows that you're there, you're paying attention, you understand, and you empathize with some part of another person's experience, thus accepting it as valid. All right, that's the complex full definition. It has these qualities of mindfulness, understanding, and empathy. But really, it is that sense of being seen. Okay, that is what you signal with validation. I see you, I hear you. And, kind of close to that is this sense that you're not alone. I'm here with you, kind of. And so at its best, I think that is what validation signals. It has this very non-judgmental quality to it. And in terms of what drew me to this, I talk in my book about being perhaps kind of innately more sensitive, or maybe even a little bit more emotionally attuned, just growing up and as a person. And so I could connect with folks like relatively easily. I think I was somebody that people often, would seek out to talk to and complain to. Yeah. Like I was that person always. But I couldn't quite wrap my head around like what it was that I was doing, like what fit, what worked, what was this process that I was attuning to. And it wasn't until I got to grad school and I was learning this very specific treatment for a very specific population, folks with a condition called borderline personality disorder, which is considered very hard to treat. And you'll see some very serious and life-threatening symptoms in the context of this disorder. So it was studying and learning how to treat that condition that I was introduced to a set of validation skills. Okay, that these are just skills that they train therapists in to help them kind of signal that I see you, I hear you. And it was like seeing the Matrix. I mean, the stuff is pretty basic in a lot of ways. Like it's things like active listening, but it was the way that these skills kind of worked together and informed each other. It was just this little equation. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I get it. I know what I can see now what I was doing. Basically, I was using different validation skills without really realizing it. And I think I probably had an above average ability to kind of hit those notes. But then once I was trained in this method, I realized like, okay, well now I'm really successful and effective at hitting those notes. And why is this just reserved? Why do you only get this training to treat, as a psychologist, and even as a psychologist to treat a very specific disorder? Like we should be teaching this in grade school. It just blew my mind, right? Like all the hurdles you have to get to just to get to that point to even receive this training. And it seemed so fundamental. That's ultimately why I wrote the book. But that's my backstory with it.
So we're going to get into the how and what makes validation so challenging. I'd be interested to know how you sort of organize the outcomes or the benefits of when we get really good at validation, right? Like, and I'm like thinking about inside my household and how I do that with my spouse and my kids, but also, inside organizations when leaders, get good at validation. Yeah, tell us about sort of the benefits or the outcomes.
I mean, I thought I knew a lot about validation. I mean, I was in a position to propose a book and write one, right? And it wasn't until I was going back and systematically looking at the research that I was like, oh my gosh, this stuff is so powerful. So the main effects, and again, these are often coming from randomized clinical trials, like a very high standard of research. They show that validation significantly improves relationships, right? Which makes sense. The more you feel seen, the more likely you are to feel appreciated. I'd even go so far as to say loved, right? It decreases conflict. So if you are able to validate, not to say that you agree with someone, but if you can communicate, I get where you're coming from. I see that. It is an immediate superpower in the context of conflict. It just brings down the temperature. We also have shown, and this is like my favorite thing and about validation, because it really is a way of communicating acceptance. I see you, I hear you, I accept you. And yet it is incredibly powerful at facilitating change. And that is how I was trained in validation. How do you use this basically to positively reinforce somebody? And that's the really cool thing about it is, in communicating acceptance, you make people more receptive to change, more open to feedback, and more willing to engage with you.
Wow.
So I think that final piece there is probably what I see as most useful in an organizational context.
Yeah.
Caroline, you shared something there that you shared so many powerful nuggets right in that response there. But one thing that I'm hearing you say and remembering from the book that really stood out to me, probably just because in the polarized world we all live in, is this idea that you can hear someone, in a sense, validate them without agreeing with them.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people that probably feels like I'm hearing you kind of offer a middle road that isn't like where most of us live, which is like either I completely disagree with you, and if I were to give you any signal that I was hearing you or empathizing with you, you might interpret that as though I am agreeing with you. And so I'm going to stay completely away from that right now. But I'm hearing you say that that's not the way. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Not only is that not the way, that is pointing you in the opposite direction. It's such a common mistake that by validating somebody, I'm co-signing on what they're saying. The fact of the matter is, my daughter is 12 right now. And I've seen her year after year go through different versions in her English class of having to do some type of opinion writing or debate writing. We are trained to take a position and fiercely defend that position. We are not trained in finding the kernel of truth in the other person's perspective and building off that. Okay. So this kind of goes counter to a lot of what we've been, indirectly trained to do, which is to
Mhm.
have strong opinions and argue for them and
Yeah.
collect data that supports them. The fact of the matter is, if you want to be able to persuade somebody, you need to
Mhm.
be able to tell them that you understand what they're saying.
Mm.
Otherwise, you are both going to be getting louder and louder in an attempt
Mhm.
to be heard.
Mhm.
So it is a myth that by communicating understanding, you will co-sign on something you find problematic, right? I
Yeah.
can say, I totally understand where you're coming from, and I do not agree.
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Oof.
This sort of gets into, I think you mentioned the idea of like validate the valid.
yeah.
This feels really clarifying. Like it could be really clarifying for people. Can
Yeah.
you share a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Sure. So in terms of validity, so I,
Yeah.
I work in these extreme situations where folks are often doing things that are very dangerous, very aggressive. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, and it can be really hard to find something to validate. I think most people nowadays can actually really relate to my work, where
Mm.
we're hearing and saying here, we're hearing and exposed to things that just seem so offensive and so problematic that the idea of accidentally, signaling that we're okay with it feels very, very dangerous.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, I think people relate to my work now more than ever, truly.
Yeah.
But what I was trained to do was to figure out what part of a person's response is valid. It doesn't have to be the entirety. Their
Mhm.
emotions may be valid, even if
Mhm.
their thoughts aren't. So they might believe something that they read in the paper or saw on TV, and they're really upset about it. Well, and it makes sense to be upset if you believe that. I can validate why you would be upset. I
Mhm.
would be too. I don't agree with your facts.
Mhm.
Quotations.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I don't agree
Right.
with your thought process, right?
Right.
So I
Yeah.
just need to find what is valid there. Often in corporate settings, what's not valid in the sense that it's not effective is behavior. All right.
Mm.
So not showing up, turning things in late, not engaging when you need to, 100,000 different ways in which you could be ineffective. And our tendency is to really provide feedback on that, right? And jump on that. Um, which, okay, like you can do that at some point. My aim is typically to open with what I can validate, which
Yeah.
might be the frustration that's leading to X, Y, or Z, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
When you open with that, again, when you focus on, I hate to say right, but when you focus on what's right,
Mhm.
you're much better positioned to address and change what's wrong, so to speak.
Mm. Mm. Caroline, this feels like a good segue to another topic we wanted to talk to you about. In our work with leadership teams, one of the areas we focus on in order to build a high performing, cohesive team is to really intentionally work on building trust and connection. Um,
Mhm.
and we're curious, what connections do you see from a team, from a peer, from one team member to another team member, their ability to, as they learn to validate each other, how that can build a greater sense of trust and connection amongst the team?
I have such a tangential example for this. I hope it works. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
often I'm working with psychologists and they're all trained in this stuff. And so it's very fun. Like collaborating with psychologists is my favorite because everyone's validating everybody. It's
Yeah.
like a real growth mindset situation. It's just why you would have lunch with anybody else, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I was working with these Kelly Leonard and some folks at Second City. I'd gone on his podcast and we were
Mm.
talking a little bit about the relationship between validation and improv.
Mm.
Okay. And
Mhm.
and they
Mm.
they really they do a lot of they work with a lot of companies and do a lot of trainings
Yeah.
in yes and
Mm.
essentially, like
Mm.
teaching people how to build off of each other rather than push
Mhm.
back against, right?
Mm.
Mhm.
Even
Yeah.
if you don't understand or agree with like someone's perspective, how do you and what I realized is that they're essentially validating.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was in this meeting with them. We decided to spin off and talk about doing a different project together. And we were just kind of on a call. I'd really just met these people very recently. And the sense on this call, like I left so excited and so energized, and I found myself being super creative. Like, I came up with all these other ideas for projects we might pursue kind of, once I'd gone offline. And what I realized is that, like, in that space, these guys are really good at yes and. They're really good at building off of saying, "Yeah, that's I see that. Okay, let's take it in this direction." No judgment, right? Just let's just collaborate. Let's just all ideas are good ideas type of energy. But the sense of trust, collaboration, and I would really highlight creativity that comes in these spaces where we feel safe, where trust is high, that is where people are comfortable taking risks. That is also where they are more receptive to feedback, okay?
Yeah.
Because they don't feel threatened by it.
Yeah, that's great, Caroline. You're making me think of like a something Joe, I don't know if we emphasize enough in our work, but I'm hearing you say things that feel very much related to psychological safety and
Yes, yes.
the importance of that, right? As it
Yeah,
relates to generation of ideas and even just the ability to openly um disagree if that were to come up. But I'm also have this sense of like the power of like this is going to sound, I don't know what's going good vibes and energy,
yeah,
like
yeah,
the building like feel of that's the sense I have when you were just describing this, like of all these
totally.
things just building and building on one another. I don't know that that's something that teams think so much about when they think about psych safety. Is it's like we're building this like momentum of energy that
Yeah.
build more and more generations of like our best ideas are coming out.
Yeah.
I 100%. It feels very experimental. I think, I think as we're talking about it, I think the risk-taking element is something that's really hard, if not impossible, to achieve in the absence of psychological safety, right?
Mhm.
Like, if you're feeling threatened, you're not gonna take risks. If you're feeling
Right.
vulnerable, you're not gonna expose yourself, okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Or risk exposing yourselves. And the risk here, I should clarify, is really, being judged,
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
seen as problematic, as contrary, as whatever.
Yeah.
Once you control for that, people can really explore in a very playful, what I have experienced to be a very playful way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that is such a unique quality to bring to any creative space, but particularly uh, our work environments.
Yeah.
Um, on the if I can add just one thing on the
Yeah.
psychological safety thing, 'cause I've heard such blowback on this, and I really, oh, yeah, everything's so about, like, feeling, everyone feeling safe, and we can't say anything, and it's gotta be so polite, so that everybody feels included and everything else. And I really wanna clarify that, like, this is not about just touchy-feely, um, let's be polite. A
Right.
psychologically safe environment is one in which people feel vulnerable or feel comfortable being vulnerable in the
Mhm.
form of taking risks,
Mhm.
saying things, having difficult conversations. We
Mhm.
Yep.
do not do that when we feel threatened. We
Right.
avoid, right? Uh, that's what I think psychological safety is meant. It's not meant to kind of facilitate. It's not about just like quiet and everyone
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the unlock I'm having here is I used to work with a leader. They were another member of our executive team, and they were a master of the yes and I'm just
Mhm.
realizing that that's what they were doing, and it was
Yeah.
just over and over
Yeah.
inside of meetings where they would somehow, in moments of tension,
Yeah.
validate someone where everyone else in the room was kinda like, "Oh gosh, we got some tension going on," right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
would sort of validate that person and somehow be able to sort of move us forward,
Yeah.
and we used to debrief like, "Hey, how do you do that? Like, what
Yeah.
just happened there?" That's what they were doing. They were
Yeah.
validating that person who was maybe raising the tension or whose idea was a bit, controversial.
Mhm.
They were validating it, and then they were allowing us to all move forward in a way that was productive, right?
Yes.
And so we talk a lot about team psychological safety as well, and what are those builder behaviors, and what are those breaker behaviors, and
Mhm.
we talk a lot about active listening and the way we show up
Mhm.
and our body language and our posture. We
Mhm.
don't do enough to teach about validation, right? And how that the micro practices there can in that moment just continue to raise up the vibe, right? The environment, the conditions in the space, right? Such that people feel just a little bit more, safe to share the next thing because I've been validated, right? That's huge.
It's the other angle here is it is also an incredibly powerful antidote for groupthink. So groupthink occurs when, we all kind of feel like we need to be on the same page. We all need to echo the same thing.
Yeah.
And so we kind of all fall in line with the loudest voice often.
Yeah.
All right. It's this falling in line that happens in a group. And when that happens, we're not thinking critically. We're certainly not thinking creatively. And the more you feel like you have to acquiesce to belong, the more likely you are to be in a groupthink situation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Caroline, I'm curious. I feel like one of the things I'm always telling, whether it's in coaching calls or sometimes group context with teams, where you sense there's a bit of skepticism, just like you were sharing, like the skepticism you've heard around psychological safety and the both and one thing I feel compelled to say is like this I imagine only works is if it's sincere, right? Which would probably only come through the skills that you're hoping people will practice, such as, you can't really genuinely bring a spirit of both and unless you're active listening and genuinely like are trying to validate the other person's perspective versus just saying this is sort of some go-to move I have that may not feel truly like I really do believe that there's more to build on here.
Yeah, like everybody knows, or at least we have maybe a stereotype in our heads of like that car salesperson, right? Or the politician who's saying all the right things, but it's like not landing.
Right.
That's what happens when you when you fake this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
People might be like, oh, yeah, okay. Like you feel it. It feels a little sleazy. So it's really, you cannot fake it and be effective.
Yeah.
The two are not compatible. But what I love and what I was, kind of alluding to in the beginning when I was talking about learning this algorithm, which was that there's a way to use these skills to kind of deepen your understanding if you're lacking it, to help you cultivate empathy when it's not there.
Yep.
And so you both are able to communicate and then cultivate within yourself. And I think we think about how we're going to change the other person, but in reality, there has to be some openness to move internally as well.
Yeah. Can you talk us through the algorithm a bit? So we've read your book. We love your book. And sort of have the model and are working to practice it ourselves. Talk us through sort of a bit of the how and that model that you've codified.
Yeah. So we, as I mentioned before in defining validation, it has these qualities of like mindfulness, which is just kind of paying attention, understanding, and empathy. And if I was to kind of rank those, they're kind of ranked those hierarchically, where, if you're just paying attention, that's going to signal kind of a low degree of validation. The person may not feel judged, right? But they might also not feel deeply seen. And if I'm really struggling, like if I'm across from my fiercest political opponent and I just don't empathize and I don't understand where they're coming from, I might only be able to attend to convey that kind of mindful attention. But here's the thing, if you do that in a certain way, we have a couple skills we use there. They function to increase your sense of understanding. Once you understand more, you can convey understanding. You have a couple of skills there to convey understanding. Now you're being mindful and you're showing that understanding. That's a deeper level of validation. Okay, guess what? You use those skills, all of a sudden you've arrived at empathy. Okay. And that is if you can communicate that, that's a really deep sense of validation. And so that was kind of that algorithm, I suppose.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So inside a conversation with your spouse, your daughter, and you're working to validate, are you is that 3-part framework in your mind and you're sort of working to go sequentially through? Is it more adaptive? Just help us to think through how you're leveraging that framework.
So I always want to go as high as I can authentically go. So if I can
Okay.
immediately go like with
Yeah.
that empathy skill, but to be honest, it's kind of it's like typing.
Mm.
Um, I know how to do it, but I'm not thinking about what I'm doing. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like it's very once you've kind of iterated on this so many times and practiced it so many times, it's intentional, but it's also somewhat like it feels kind of intuitive, like when you're typing.
Yeah.
You know, you had to
Yeah.
really slowly map it out at first when you were practicing.
Mhm.
And I had to very intentionally use specific skills until I got comfortable with them. But
Yeah.
now I plug into a situation and I just, okay, there's the F key. Uh,
Yeah.
I need a hit. I need an F. It's right here. Type is how it more feels to me, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
If
Absolutely.
that makes sense.
You're becoming a master,
Yeah,
right?
but this is the
I
great
think
thing. Anybody can. This is
yeah.
like that's what I love about this, right? It's
Yeah.
not just like high EQ. It's like,
Yeah.
no, anybody can develop
Mm,
this.
that's great. And I'm sure is it safe to say you would say it's okay to move through this a bit awkwardly as you're learning,
Please,
and
yes,
and
Mhm.
and
there's no other way.
maybe do it in like not the most high stakes situation as you're learning.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. When I go into companies that like, I feel like the leaderships and the C-suites that bring me in are always like, because I'm like, and I want you to do this with your kids and your
Yeah.
spouses, and let's start there,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? Because that's just the safest place to play around with this.
Mhm.
And then before trying to, incorporate it into like a, a review or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
That's
Well,
yeah, go ahead, Joe.
help us to. I think this is. It seems. I mean, even just hearing you break down the three levels, it seems like it should be easier than it actually is, right? Ultimately, we know
Mhm.
challenging to do, even when we have been gifted a framework like you've given us. What
Mhm.
makes it so challenging? You talk to us about, the reasons why, even in those moments when, maybe someone you've even mentioned this, right? Like part of the practice is, do you want me to validate right now? Do you want me to
Mhm.
problem solve with
Mhm.
you? What's even when someone shares just want validation. What makes it so hard? Talk us through maybe the human reality here.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. One, as you alluded to, we are hardwired to problem solve.
Okay.
And so when people come to us with an issue, when even if we're just in a conversation, we want to provide solutions.
Hmm.
All right. My daughter says she has a headache. Did you drink water? Right. Um, Someone
Yeah.
says this, I'm having issues with this guy on my team. Did you provide feedback to them? Okay.
Yeah.
Like we just jump to let's get to the solution. That is how we're wired. All right.
Hmm.
We are just problem solvers. You do have to pause and ask yourself. It's about slowing down and
Hmm.
thinking, like, what does this situation require? Should I validate first or problem solve first?
Hmm.
9 out of 10 times when people come to you with an issue, they're seeking validation.
Mm,
9 out of 10 times what we give is problem
Mm.
solving. And
Wow.
there's a major mismatch there.
Hmm.
Okay. That's not to say that you can't also problem solve after validating. In fact, I almost always do. I
Yeah.
will say, like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, oh, I hate those headaches after school. Oh, I used to have those when I was your age. It's the worst. Oh, do you want an ice pack? Like, I might then
Yeah.
go into problem solving, but I'm not
Mhm.
going to miss that first beat.
Mhm.
mm,
Um, in corporate settings, I think this can feel a little bit, I think we're afraid to be too personal,
Yeah.
right? I often see folks afraid to kind of recognize the struggle that someone might be experiencing or to name it.
Mhm.
yeah.
Um, you came in late over the weekend and you worked the weekend to have to get this out. That sucks. I'm sorry.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right? That's validation.
Mm.
Um,
Caroline, one of the things that I know that I personally have struggled with, and I'm in making this shift, and I'm
hmm,
curious if others have, is that especially in the context as a leader, like in my role on
mhm,
executive teams and other parts of my career, I think I had an agreement or with myself, like, or just this that I part of the primary value that I was bringing in my role was to problem solve. And
mhm,
so that if I wasn't doing that, somehow I was like actually not bringing my best effort, right? So if I did
Mm-hmm.
anything, so even though even now, I know what you're saying is true, and yet I'm always working
Mm-hmm.
against this idea that I think somehow my value that I'm offering to the people I work with is in my ability to problem solve. So yeah, so does that feel
Can
like
I
a
say
relatable?
something? Yeah,
Yeah,
it does. But can I say something a little radical?
Yeah.
I think part of our jobs as leaders is to help people find the solutions themselves
yeah,
and cultivate that intuition and their confidence. And
yes,
when we jump with the solution so too quickly, we
Mhm.
deprive them of that.
yep,
We don't let them develop the skills they need to arrive at where I'm at, for
Mhm.
instance.
yep,
And so I don't want to intervene too quickly. And what I have found, and I promise you guys, if you play around with this stuff, you will find this. It's just shocking how much more, as I was saying before, like creative and
Mhm.
constructive people are in managing situations once they feel seen.
Yeah.
Like they just are unblocked. The emotions that were getting in the way decrease, and there's a bit more clarity. And I think that's what good leaders do, right?
yep.
They inspire, they
Yeah.
don't micromanage.
Yeah. If you have a few more minutes for another coaching session, I'll give you my challenge
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
so I think as soon as you were sharing that earlier, my reflection was, I think that I have held back at times from validating because I'm worried that I'm going to sort of communicate, like, I'm gonna make this a normal thing. I think, like,
Mm,
it's almost like they're complaining, right? I'm associating this communication that's coming to me as sort of a not the work we need to be doing, right?
mhm,
It's
mhm,
something other than, like, the work we need to be actually focused on. It's maybe
mhm,
coming in the form of a complaint or
mhm,
a and I in my head, I'm thinking like, "Wow, I don't wanna stay there, like, let's not, because then we're gonna just complain all the time. So let's just,
mhm.
like, how can I move around it, still try to
Yeah.
show some sort of support through, like, talking about something
Yeah.
else, right? But it's
Yeah.
not but it's I'm not valid, I'm doing the opposite, right? I'm ignoring, right? So
Yes, yes.
help me through this. What
Well, I want to validate actually. Your intuition might be right. So I'm a
Yeah.
behaviorist, which means I just really think in terms of like, what reinforces versus punishes certain behaviors in any
Yeah.
environment. And what you're describing, perhaps you do have somebody who is excessively complaining,
Mhm.
okay? And it's getting in their way. In
Mhm.
which case, I don't necessarily want to reinforce that. And
Mhm.
validation is very reinforcing, okay?
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
I might strategically choose, like, if this has become a problem, if the
Yeah.
person's consistently complaining and not arriving at more solutions, not um, feeling better
Yeah.
such that they're more productive or what have you, it's not working. And I will
Yeah.
I will turn down the volume on that validation. So I think it's a really
Yeah.
astute point that we have to think about how is this functioning. But so
Yeah.
long as you're intentional about it and you're actually testing rather than just assuming, oh, if I validate
Mhm.
any part of this, I'm going to have a real mess on my hands.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
mistake. You can run little experiments. I do this all day long,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it is a balancing act, but you shouldn't just assume it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I mean, this is kinda getting back to the validate the valid, trying to notice,
Exactly.
right, what
Yes.
yeah. Okay.
Try to validate the
That's good.
valid, and then if
Yeah.
that's not leading to more of what you want, then don't do it, right? Or
Yeah.
validate something else. Validate when
Yeah.
they're being effective.
Mm,
Yeah.
Okay. That's
That's
where you
good.
put your attention.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for this free
Oh,
coaching,
anytime.
in the
Yeah,
Yeah.
podcast. I
anytime.
appreciate
Mhm.
it.
This would be a fun podcast if we all coach each other,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? It'd be really
We got
interesting.
a new concept,
That's
right?
a great
Yeah,
concept.
totally.
One of the things you wrote about in the book that a line that stuck with me that I really loved was you wrote that everyone wants to be seen and accepted for who they are. right? But it made me wonder about something else related to this, and it's, have you also seen validation help people grow into who they haven't yet become, right? So like seen for who they are, but I think one thing that inspires us in our work is that people often haven't had the support and people around them to come close to reaching their potential,
Oh
right?
my
Whether the
goodness, yeah.
systems or the mindsets and
Yeah.
relationships around them, they haven't been there, the environment hasn't been there, and they don't even know what their potential is. Oftentimes, people around them see it and then it unlocks. So curious, how have you seen validation help with this?
Wow. So again, yes, yes, 100 times yes. In my work, like this, these techniques were actually developed again for folks with borderline personality disorder, which is a condition in which folks actually really struggle with understanding their sense of identity. They tend to kind of chameleon. They don't have a firm sense of self. They'll often adopt the personality of whomever they're kind of talking to or into in the moment. And what validation does is it sends these very clear signals of like, I see that there. See that? That's your strength. That's your strength. It does draw attention to, it does crystallize in all of the ways you described, these qualities that people maybe kind of show a little bit, but aren't confident in,
Yeah.
and haven't come to really see as who they are. Like when you shine a light on it, it grows. That's been my experience. I mean, that is how we use these things clinically. And why would they only apply clinically? People are people. The same science applies.
That's beautiful. I just, that's such a powerful image of shining a light on it, and then and then it grows.
Yeah.
But I'm hearing you just like you're pausing someone in a moment and helping them to understand that thing is true about you, right?
Yes.
And there's real potential, and maybe you don't realize that.
And hey, did you catch that? Hey, look what you did there. That's
Yeah.
the third time you've done that. You're really good. Like that's I like that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're figuring this out. Like your team sucks, but this is the third time you've navigated this type of a situation. That's
Yeah.
impressive, right?
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
That's really good.
Well, Caroline, one question that we ask everybody that comes on the podcast is to think of the best teammate that you've ever had.
Uh-huh,
And what characteristics did they embody? You don't have to
uh-huh,
name this person. I think we're more interested in the characteristics of these best teammates. But
uh-huh.
yeah, who comes to mind for you, and what made you think of that person?
Yeah, I've got someone immediately in mind, and I'll just give her a shout out, Sue. We've actually collaborated together quite a few times on different coaching initiatives and what have you. The traits that stand out to me, of course, it's going to be validation, right? So I feel very seen
Yeah.
in this person's presence. I trust that she will give me honest feedback. Okay, so there's in order for me to do my best work, I need someone who sees more than I can about what I'm doing. And maybe that's, the good, but often also the critical. And so that's really important to me. I love to laugh. And since we're often, as you guys know, in the coaching sector as well, you're often dealing with problems and heavier things. If we can laugh about it, I can tackle anything.
Hmm.
So she's really funny. She's quick to laugh. She's honest. She's direct with her feedback. I can trust that she'll give it to me, and she's really validating. So
Hmm.
that's it. That's it for me. That does it. Those check all the boxes I need.
I love it. We talk a lot we talk a lot about support challenge leadership and teamship. The idea of someone who can both be really supportive in that relationship, but also be willing to challenge us in different
Yes.
ways. And I think you're helping us to see yet again how those types of qualities in a teammate can really bring out the best in ourselves,
Absolutely.
right? And I think what you're helping to really solidify for us is just how essential validation is on the
Mm.
support side of that sort of equation. So thanks for sharing.
Totally. I
And then
I
you got to
think
laugh.
it's the common denominator. Like everything else is like when you look at why something is working, or it's like, oh yeah, there was this quality of like, you feel seen, and therefore you feel safe to get feedback from them.
We can do that. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, Caroline, by the way, I love that you mentioned laughing and I think it just feels like maybe that's not the first thing that people might think about, but when I hear you say that, it feels like a permission structure for leaders or just anybody to think about, like, what's the unique thing that actually is really important to you that maybe isn't I don't know, the first espoused leadership value you have, but in reality, like, this really gives me life, and I love working with people that want to laugh together.
It is so true. It is not something I think we would open with in terms of like what makes a great leader, or like what are the qualities that they should have. But like, I totally think, man, if you can laugh together, like it's all good. You can do anything.
That's right. Yep. Joe and I have some of those unique things. Whenever we're in different cities, but whenever we're with each other, we run together, right? And that's been kind of a I don't know that I would make it a requirement, but for like anything that I work with, but it's been just a really great like thing to say, like, we get to work out together, and we've had some great ideas and brainstorms and really powerful reflections on those runs together. So yeah.
That's amazing. I feel like that actually reflects a high degree of trust. Like, for maybe not if you've been doing it for a while, but like the first, hey, do you want to go for a run? Like, you've got to trust that, like, I'm not going to feel judged. What if I go too slow? What if I run weird?
Right.
That's like a real litmus test for a relationship. Do you want to go for a run?
I led with a lot of deprecating comments. I'm not,
Okay,
I'm not as in good shape as I used to be.
Yeah. I run backwards. Yeah.
Right. This is hard for me to run forwards. Normally it's backwards. Yeah. Well, Caroline, as we wrap up here, is there anything you'd like to promote? And we'd also love to tell our listeners how they can find you.
Yes, sure. My book, Validation, you can find it wherever you get books. You can check out behind the scene footage, videos and little clips that went into or behind the scenes of my book on my website, drcarolinefleck.com. And you can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok at Dr. Caroline Fleck.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having us on. We're such a big fan. We've shared your book with a lot of people. We will continue to. We hope to stay connected, and we'll maybe call for a free coaching session here in the future.
Anytime. So long as you're funny, we can do it.
Oh yeah. Well, we'll try. We like to laugh. So, well, thanks for tuning into this episode of Leading Together. If you found it valuable, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps more leadership teams discover these conversations. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment with your thoughts. And you can always find more content and resources at sixlevers.co, including signing up for our newsletter, which ships every Tuesday morning. Thanks so much.